Hey guys! So today we're going to walk through the writing section of College Board's first practice test. I also have videos on all the different passages of the reading sections, so go check those out if you need help with that. Also, this video is sponsored by Prep Scholar. If you're out of free practice tests to take, need to brush up on grammar basics, or just want an extra push in the right direction, their SAT program is incredibly motivating and helpful. I used their online course to help me prepare, and that's one of the reasons I was able to score 1600 on my SAT. They have helpful videos explaining every single topic you need, way more in depth than I can go on this channel, and they have a huge bank of practice problems that do a really good job of replicating actual test questions. Check out the affiliate link in the description down below if you're interested, and if you end up purchasing their program, I'll get a commission from that. Thanks for listening, and let's get into the video. So what I like to do is basically skim/read the entire passage and then answer all the questions that go along with that as I go. So that's what I'll try to demonstrate today. Also, I am going to kind of be speed reading out loud a little bit because that's just how I would read it in my head. And for these, the content and the plot really isn't that important. You just want to be getting an idea of it while you read. So this one's called Way to Go. Greek yogurt, a strained form of cultured yogurt, has grown enormously in popularity in the United States since it was first introduced in the country in the late 1980s. From 2011 to 2012 alone, sales of Greek yogurt in the US increased by 50%. The resulting increase in Greek yogurt production has forced those involved in the business to address the detrimental effects that the yogurt making process may be having on the environment. Fortunately, farmers and others in the Greek yogurt business have found many methods of controlling and eliminating most environmental threats. Given these solutions, as well as the many health benefits of food, the advantages of Greek yogurt outdo the potential drawbacks of its production. You're not usually given a lot of context for what the writing section is after. You kind of just have to figure it out based on what you're given and what the choices are. So in this case, they want us to either keep this word or replace it with something else. And for these vocab type questions, I'll just read all the choices within the sentence, see which one sounds the best. So the advantages of Greek yogurt outdo the potential drawbacks, the advantages defeat the potential drawbacks, the advantages outperform the potential drawbacks, or the advantages outweigh the potential drawbacks. In this case, I would pick outweigh, because all of the other ones have a connotation that the advantages are like competing with the drawbacks, like it personifies them a little bit too much. And I know that these questions can be really tricky if you're not a native English speaker, because sometimes it all comes down to like the tone, because all these sort of mean the same thing. Anyway, let's continue. So whenever you see these numbers, keep in mind that you're probably going to have to order the sentences later on. Just be thinking about that while you read. The main environmental problem caused by the production of Greek yogurt is the creation of acid whey as a byproduct. Because it requires up to 4 times more milk to make than conventional yogurt does, Greek yogurt produces larger amounts of acid whey, which is difficult to dispose of. To address the problem of disposal, farmers have found a number of uses for acid whey. They can add it to livestock feed as a protein supplement, and people can make their own Greek-style yogurt at home by straining regular yogurt. So for question 2, we're asked to find which choice provides the most relevant detail. As I was reading this, I kind of noticed that these two examples seemed very different. Like, it's talking about the uses for acid whey, and it gives livestock feed as one of them. And then it just kind of jumps into a tangent about how people can make their own yogurt, not really talking about acid whey or anything like that. So I know we're probably not going to want this choice. So we're going to try to find a use of acid whey. So we have, they can add it to livestock feed as a protein supplement and convert it into gas to use as fuel in electricity production. That is a use, so let's just confirm our choice there. While sweet whey is more desirable as a food additive for humans. So sweet whey is a different type of whey than acid whey, I believe. So that's not a use for acid whey. And which provides an important element of their diet. Yeah, this is a detail, and it kind of gives us more information on why it's so useful in livestock feed. But since we're looking for a number of uses, we probably want another various use for it, not just explaining more about the same use that we already have in there. If it is improperly introduced into the environment, acid whey runoff can pollute waterways. Here we have a classic its versus its type question. So we are talking about multiple waterways. So anything with the singular waterway here, this is saying like something that belongs to the waterway. So like the waterways, water, the waterways bank. So this apostrophe S is kind of used to denote like ownership of something, not plural. And we have acid whey runoff could have polluted waterways, depleting the oxygen content, blah blah. So this is kind of talking in past tense more, and we want to keep it more in present tense because this is an issue that's ongoing. They still might pollute waterways, not there was a possibility that they could have. Even if you don't pick up on that necessarily, when we were reading this, it didn't sound too clunky or anything, and in general, the shorter choice, if it works, is going to be the one you want to choose, because the writing section is all about concision. So this one is going to be no change. Yogurt manufacturers, food scientists, and government officials are also working together to develop additional solutions for reusing whey. So here we have like a list of 3 things, or people I guess. We have the yogurt manufacturers, scientists, and government officials. And in this case, it's kind of like a classic Oxford comma scenario. The thing that's up to debate for a lot of people is whether or not we include this comma. We see that there's a semicolon here, which is definitely incorrect. So whenever you're making a list of 3 things like this, you can either separate them by 2 commas there and then just proceed your sentence as normal or end it with a period, or you just omit this comma, which I personally like the Oxford comma, so I would keep it. But the writing section will always use the Oxford comma, I think, and it would never test you on something like this. All we have to do is realize that it's a list and then pick the one with the Oxford comma. The other options have too many commas. That is a lot of commas going on right there. They have a colon or a semicolon, which are both unnecessary in this case. Remember, a semicolon is only used if you have 2 independent clauses of each other, so they can stand alone. Yogurt manufacturers, food scientists, that can't stand alone on its own. A colon is a little bit more up for interpretation, but generally in a list like this, you would not have it like right before an and. Alright, so now we have our ordering question. If it is improperly introduced into the environment, acid whey runoff can pollute waterways, depleting the oxygen content of streams and rivers as it decomposes. So now let's rephrase it. This is kind of saying that it has an environmental impact. We see it's going to be polluting waterways, depleting oxygen content. That's kind of the focus of this sentence. So now let's go back and rephrase all of our sentences to try to figure out where this one should go. So this one is saying producing Greek yogurt causes acid whey, and that's an environmental problem. Number 2 is saying it produces a large amount of acid whey that's difficult to dispose of. Number 3 is talking about the disposal and how there can be a number of uses that can substitute for that. Then number 4, this is a very clean transition, I would say. It's right into those uses, so I don't think it should be placed after sentence 3, because that would just disrupt the flow. And it's saying farmers, and then that they right there is referring to the farmers. Then we have our current sentence 5, which is talking about environmental impact of acid whey runoff. Then sentence 6 is talking about how everyone together can develop additional solutions for reusing the whey. I would say that sentence 5 does not belong here because sentences 4 and 6 are both talking about the uses, and so is 3 for that matter. So having this in here is pretty clunky and doesn't transition well right back into talking about the uses, so we definitely have to move it. Now the question is where? After sentence 1 or 2? So remember that sentence 2 is talking directly about the acid whey and that it's difficult to dispose, and I think that links better to this sentence about kind of how an improper disposal could affect the environment. If instead we put it directly after sentence 1, it would be talking about the production of Greek yogurt, this creation of acid whey, then talk super in-depth about acid whey being improperly introduced into the environment, except we don't know how it's being introduced yet. We need the sentence 2 here first to tell us about the manufacturing process of this Greek yogurt and that it produces a bunch of acid whey before we talk about the environmental impacts, you know? So in this case, it would be after sentence 2. Though these conservation methods can be costly and time-consuming, they are well worth the effort. These ones tend to be the hardest type of question, in my experience at least. This is a should the writer delete this or not, and why type of question. So for these, it's helpful to read what's before it and after it, just in making our decision, because that on its own can't really tell us anything. So let's go back to here. Everyone is developing additional solutions for reusing the whey. Though these solutions might be costly, they're necessary. Now let's read a little. Nutritionists consider Greek yogurt to be a healthy food. It's an excellent source of calcium and protein, serves to be a digestive aid, and it contains a few calories in its unsweetened, low and non-fat forms. So this next paragraph is not really related to the previous one, right? This paragraph's more just about like the benefits of Greek yogurt. So now let's read it as if we didn't have this sentence here to see if it would be any better or any worse. Yogurt manufacturers, food scientists, and government officials are also working together to develop additional solutions for reusing whey. Nutritionists consider Greek yogurt to be a healthy food. It's an excellent source of calcium and protein. So that's kind of an abrupt transition, I would say. So I think we should probably keep this. Let's just figure out why these are incorrect. I think it does provide a transition. It probably could be better, but you know, saying that although these methods are costly, they're worth the effort. Maybe because people enjoy this yogurt and it has all these benefits. It kind of connects it with this little phrase. It fails to support the main argument of the passage as introduced in the first paragraph. I wouldn't say that at all. This whole thing is just about Greek yogurt and its popularity. I guess it doesn't directly support the very first paragraph, but not every single sentence in a passage has to do that, so that's fine. Now let's figure out why we need to keep it. It continues the explanation of how acid whey can be disposed of safely. It's not really explaining anything else, is the thing. It's just kind of saying, it's kind of wrapping up the point of that last paragraph. So I would say it's probably D. Let's just verify. It sets up the argument in the paragraph for the benefits of Greek yogurt. And I would say it does that because of this phrase here. It's well worth the effort. It goes on to list all the benefits of Greek yogurt, why people love it so much. This could be interpreted as it's just worth it to save the environment as a whole, but I think it's talking more about the Greek yogurt specifically. So saying it's worth it so we can eat our Greek yogurt. So it is D. And as we were reading past a little bit, I hope you guys noticed some things that were maybe a little off with the next few sentences. So for number 7, let's just pretend the sentence starts there. It is an excellent source of calcium and protein, serves to be a digestive aid, and it contains few calories. So this is a parallel structure question, and the reason this sounds a little bit off is because these verbs aren't matching up. Our first verb is actually is, and yes, that's a verb. It is an excellent source of protein, and notice we could replace this with serves as. It serves as an excellent source of protein. Then we have serves to be a digestive aid, and you won't really hear people saying that much. To be in its pure state isn't usually used, so let's see what we can replace it with. Serves as is probably the one we want to go with, but also serves like a digestive aid or serves for a digestive aid. Serves as is definitely the most natural phrasing. A good double check is that we can replace this is with serves as, and that should still work in our sentence. That's how we know we made them all the same type of verb. So it serves as an excellent source of protein, serves as a digestive aid, and blah blah blah. So we did it. For number 8, this is kind of the same type question. So we have it as the root of our sentence kind of in this case. So it is, it serves as, but then here we have it contains. We have a double it. So we'll definitely want to get rid of that it somehow because it's not really necessary. The only way it might work, and this is still a little wordy, is if you had said it in front of all of these things. So it is a source, it serves as a digestive aid, and it contains. So we either want all of them to be its or only the first one. So let's figure out what we can replace it with. It's an excellent source of protein, serves as a digestive aid, and containing few calories, and contains few calories, or and will contain few calories. So if this hasn't jumped out at you yet, we will want to keep all of the verbs in their plural form. So like here we have serves, so we'll want to go with contains. Okay, now for number 9, Greek yogurt is slightly lower in sugar and carbohydrates than conventional yogurt is. Also, because it's more concentrated, Greek yogurt contains slightly more protein per serving, thereby helping people stay satiated for longer periods of time. So this is a transition word question, and we have to be really careful here because it can be easy to trip up if we don't read the sentence directly before this and see how it should be connecting. Okay, so this sentence is mentioning how Greek yogurt is lower in sugar and carbohydrates than conventional yogurt. Then this sentence is saying it's more concentrated and contains more protein, helping people stay full for longer. So these are both benefits of Greek yogurt, but if we look at our transition words, none of these 3 would properly connect the 2 because we would have Greek yogurt is lower in sugar and carbs. In other words, because it's more concentrated, it contains more protein. In other words, it's only used like if it's verbatim what the last sentence is saying or if the point follows directly from that. But this is kind of 2 different points. In other words is out. Therefore, because it's more concentrated, it having less sugar and carbohydrates doesn't necessarily translate to it being more concentrated. Like there's not a direct relationship there. For instance also doesn't work because it's not an example of it having lower sugar and carbs. So none of these would connect the sentences exactly how we want. I think we should keep our also because it's just a kind of nice, oh yeah, and this is also true, instead of trying to directly prove a relationship that doesn't exist between 2 things. This next one is kind of the closest thing to a pure vocab question that the test has, which is a little unfortunate if you're bad at vocab, like me. But let's go through and explain why all the wrong choices are wrong. Remember, this is talking about like higher concentration in protein keeps people, it's trying to say full for longer periods of time. Then we have fulfilled for longer periods of time. That has like weird connotations, I feel like, for this context. The yogurt doesn't magically cure all of your problems, so I feel like that's a little too strong of a term there. Complacent has a little bit of a negative connotation with it, like, you just let this happen, like, too pleased with something, not willing to change at all. So I think this one's a little bit too negative for what we want. Helping people stay sufficient for longer periods of time also would be incorrect, because that's saying that people themselves are sufficient, which is like really weird. Like if you didn't eat yogurt, you wouldn't be sufficient. I don't know, that just doesn't make sense. So satiated is our correct answer here, and that's just another word for being full or satisfied. But you see how it can be tricky, because these all kind of mean the same things, they just have slightly different connotations to them. These health benefits have prompted Greek yogurt's recent surge in popularity. In fact, Greek yogurt can be found in an increasing number of products such as snack food and frozen desserts. Because consumers reap the nutritional benefits of Greek yogurt and support those who make and sell it, therefore farmers and businesses should continue finding safe and effective methods of producing the food. Okay, so this therefore definitely doesn't belong here, so I know we need to change that. This sentence here could almost stand alone on its own. It'd be a little weird maybe, but this is independent, and when we have it connected with a comma to this previous sentence, it really doesn't feel right. And plus, these sentences are just asking to be connected somehow, but not with this therefore here. Our point can easily be made without the therefore, and honestly, we could just drop it out of the sentence entirely and have it sound a lot better. So, because consumers reap the nutritional benefits of Greek yogurt and support those who make and sell it, farmers and businesses should continue finding safe and effective methods of producing the food. That is much more clean. It works a lot better. And for the rest of our answers, the so has the same problem as the therefore. And a colon doesn't really belong here, because colons are for like making a super emphasized example. Here's my list, here's my data, whatever. It has more of oomph than what it's used for here. We definitely don't want any of those, and in this case, just taking out the therefore works. Alright, next passage. Most of Greenland's interior is covered by a thick layer of ice and compressed snow known as the Greenland ice sheet. The size of this ice sheet fluctuates seasonally. In summer, average daily high temperatures in Greenland can rise to slightly above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, partially melting the ice. In the winter, the ice sheet thickens as additional snow falls, and average daily low temperatures can drop to as low as 20 degrees. So our first question is, which choice most accurately and effectively represents the information in the graph? And this is our graph. So right now, it says that average daily low temperatures can drop to as low as 20 degrees. And we see we have this key here, average daily high and low temperatures. So we're going to want to look out for this bar. And we see what it's referring to now is actually the average daily high temperature in around March. That's not what we want. If we say instead that it drops to 12 degrees Fahrenheit, that seems a lot more accurate. And we see that's about the lowest that this line gets, which would make sense. Looking at the other choices, we have average daily low temperatures drop to their lowest point on December 13th. And we see it's 19 degrees here. It was 12 degrees over here, so this one's automatically out. And average daily low temperatures can drop to 10 degrees Fahrenheit and stay there for months. This graph reaches close to 10, but it doesn't quite get to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which is right here. We see it never quite crosses that line, so that one's also out. Typically, the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer. This follows several weeks of higher temperatures. So in this question, we're looking to effectively combine the two sentences at this portion right here. And you'll see a lot of questions like this. The key with these ones is to be as concise as possible. We don't want any extra words that we don't need. So let's read our choices. Typically, the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer, following several weeks of higher temperatures. This one grammatically works, and looking at the other ones, they all look a lot longer. Let's plug them in just to see how they would sound, though. Typically, the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer, and this thawing follows several weeks of higher temperatures. The and this thawing is pretty redundant since it already mentions thawing there. We don't really need it. Typically, the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer, and such thawing follows. Same problem with this one. And then typically the ice sheet shows thawing in late summer, and this evidence follows several weeks of higher temperatures. This one's even less concise. So in this case, A is our best choice. Now, next question. For example, in the summer of 2012, virtually the entire Greenland ice sheet underwent thawing at or near its surface by mid-July, the earliest date on record. So this is going to be a transition word question. We really have to read and comprehend the sentence directly before this to understand which transition word we need to choose here. Remember, this is talking about the ice sheet showing evidence of thawing in late summer, following several weeks of high temperatures. Now, in our current sentence, it's saying that the entire ice sheet underwent thawing by mid-July, the earliest date on record. So I wouldn't say that's an example of it thawing in late summer, because this is kind of an anomaly. This is the earliest date on record. So we definitely need to change our transition word. With these two words, we have as such, and moreover. Moreover is like additionally, and that doesn't really belong here because it's not a super strong connecting word there. As such is kind of the same as for example. It's saying that the mid-July would be an example of it thawing in late summer. The word we want is however, because this shows that there's a difference between what was expected, the thawing in late summer, and what actually happened in the summer of 2012. So however, in the summer of 2012, the ice sheet underwent thawing by mid-July, the earliest date on record. That makes the most sense here. Most scientists looking for the causes of the Great Melt of 2012 have focused exclusively on rising temperatures. The summer of 2012 was the warmest in 170 years, records show. But Jason Box, an associate professor of geology at Ohio State, believes that another factor added to the early thaw, the dark snow problem. So here we have what I'd consider a comma question. We're just looking for where these commas need to be placed for this to be grammatically correct. And one concept that might be good to keep in mind is called an appositive. This is when you have a little extra bit of detail between two commas to describe something you just mentioned. So you could say the SAT, a standardized test used in college admissions, has 4 sections. So without this part, it could stand alone as a sentence. So adding this little detailed thing in the middle always requires you have a comma before and after it. So here we have, but Jason Box believes that another factor added to the early thaw. That could stand alone on its own. We have a little bit of detail, so we need an extra comma right there to make it have proper grammar. And we'd want to pick C here and not D because this doesn't contain the entire detailed phrase. It cuts off early with this comma. So then it would read like, but Jason Box, an associate professor of geology at Ohio State, believes, like, it doesn't make as much sense. And now for this one, we have, but Jason Box believes that another factor added to the early thaw, the dark snow problem. And we know that a semicolon is not going to work here, because whenever you have a semicolon, the two things on either side of it need to be able to stand alone as sentences. And the dark snow problem is just a sentence fragment. And it was the dark snow problem doesn't work any better, because that's still a semicolon, so that one's out. So remember when I was saying that colons add like that extra bit of emphasis? This is kind of the case where we'd want to use a colon. The way colons work is you don't really need any extra words that detract from the emphasis of the statement. You can just say another factor added to the early thaw, the dark snow problem, with a colon there, and be fine. If you said another factor added to the early thaw, being the dark snow problem, not only is being kind of a weird verb tense to use, but it's unnecessary for colons. You don't need it there. So for that one, C works. According to Box, a leading Greenland expert, tundra fires in 2012 from as far away as North America produced great amounts of soot. Some of it drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke and then fell as particles onto the ice sheet. So hopefully you noticed that these two parts of the sentence could stand alone right now. So we're going to need something stronger than a comma to connect them. That automatically gets rid of that choice. So if we replace of it with soot, so some soot drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke, that's still a complete sentence, so we would have the same issue as if we didn't change it at all. And some of which drifted over Greenland in plumes of smoke, that would be not a complete sentence anymore, so it means that could work in that space. And the of which refers to the soot that's right here, so that all makes sense. So I'd say we should probably go with this choice, but let's check what happens when we delete the underlined portion. Some drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke and then fell as particles onto the ice sheet. That is also a standalone sentence. So our subject would just be some in this case, I guess, and then drifted is the verb. So I hope that makes sense a little bit, but yeah, that's why we'd go with C. So now we take a look at the second part of the sentence, some of which drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke and then fell as particles onto the ice sheet. Let's think about what we know about parallel structure. This verb is going to have to match with any other verbs in the sentence. So some drifted and fell. That kind of matches right now, I would say, because they're both in past tense. If we say drifted and falls, falls is present tense, so that one wouldn't work. Will fall is future tense. And had fallen is just kind of another way to say fell that's not as concise. And it's kind of more distant. We want it to be like it fell as particles, not it had fallen previously far in the past and isn't an issue now. So that's why we'd go with A for this one. Scientists have long known that soot particles facilitate melting by darkening snow and ice, limiting its ability to reflect the sun's rays. So here we have kind of an its versus its question, but this one can be deceiving, and I feel like I would mess this up on tests sometimes because I wasn't fully comprehending what was going on in the passage. We know right off the bat that it's is wrong because this is saying it is. That's the same as if we expanded it out like that. It is limiting it is ability. We want it to be talking about a thing's ability, its ability, with no apostrophe. But we also have there and there. So in this case, this there would be wrong no matter what because it's referring to like, oh, that's over there, a position, not showing ownership of something. But in deciding between its and there, we have to figure out what this sentence is talking about. So soot particles facilitate melting by darkening snow and ice, limiting the snow and ice's ability to reflect the sun's rays, not limiting the soot's particles' ability to reflect the sun's rays. So it's easy if you're just skimming to think it's talking about soot particles or just ice limiting its own ability. So in this case, it's talking about the snow and ice's ability to reflect the sun's rays. So we'd have to use there since it's talking about more than one thing. So scientists have long known that soot particles facilitate melting by darkening snow and ice, limiting their ability to reflect the sun's rays. That one is just a really good demonstration on why it's important to sort of be reading as you go along. You don't have to like comprehend every single detail. You at least have to comprehend a couple sentences at a time, you know? As Box explains, soot is an extremely powerful light absorber. It settles over the ice and captures the sun's heat. The result is a self-reinforcing cycle. As the ice melts, the land and water under the ice become exposed, and since the land and water are darker than snow, the surface absorbs even more heat, which is related to the rising temperatures. So this question is asking which choice best completes the description of a self-reinforcing cycle, like he mentioned here. And all of these are going to be grammatically correct. It's just a matter of the best stylistic choice for the passage relating to the self-reinforcing cycle concept. We could say the surface absorbs even more heat, which raises the surface temperature, begins to cool at a certain point, or leads to additional melting. So think about a cycle. We kind of want it to start where it ends. So the ice melts, the stuff under it becomes exposed. Since that's darker, it absorbs more heat. Then right now we just have that it's related to rising temperatures, which isn't super strong. We already kind of said that it's going to heat up in the previous part of the sentence. This one's kind of the same way, and it's definitely not cooling, because this is all about global warming and ice caps, but leads to additional melting. If we plug that in, we would have the ice melts, land and water gets exposed, it's darker and absorbs more heat, and then leads to additional melting. So that would connect it right back to the beginning, and that would be our cycle. So see why we'd want to choose this one instead of the two related to temperature. Another trick to help you out is these two are virtually the same, or they're very similar to each other. And whenever you have two that are almost identical to each other, you want to double check yourself and make sure that there's not a better option that's not related to one of those two. Alright, so when you see these numbers, keep in mind that you're going to need to order something eventually. So Box's research is important because the fires of 2012 might not be a one-time phenomenon. According to scientists, rising Arctic temperatures are making northern latitudes greener and thus more fire-prone. The pattern Box observed in 2012 may repeat itself again, with harmful effects on the Arctic ecosystem. So I think I went over this one in my other writing section video that kind of gives an overview of the whole thing. So go watch that if you want more general advice. But this one is a repetition question. So we have the words repeat and again, which is redundant. So we want to pick the choice that doesn't have any redundancies. So this one would say the pattern Box observed may repeat itself with damage and harmful effects on the Arctic ecosystem. So that would kind of be repeating itself too, because it's talking about the damage, and then harmful effects is kind of the same thing. And then the last one, you have the pattern may repeat itself possibly. So may and possibly are the words that repeat themselves here. In this case, we don't need any of those additional words. The pattern Box observed in 2012 may repeat itself with harmful effects on the Arctic ecosystem. That stands well enough on its own. Remember, in general, you want to be picking the most concise answer. Even though all these are grammatically correct, some of them are just more wordy and unnecessary than others. Okay, now we have our ordering sentences question, and we're actually looking for sentence 4, so let's go ahead and read the rest of it and then try to order them. Box is currently organizing an expedition to gather this crucial information. The next step for Box and his team is to travel to Greenland to perform direct sampling of the ice in order to determine just how much the soot is contributing to the melting of the ice sheet. Members of the public will be able to track his team's progress and even help fund the expedition through a website Box has created. So, Box is organizing an expedition. When do we want to say this? So let's go through and rephrase all the sentences in our own words to see if there's a place where this one definitely belongs. His research is important because the fires probably aren't a one-time thing. According to scientists, rising temperatures is making the Arctic more fire-prone. The pattern Box observed may repeat itself with harmful effects on the Arctic. The next step is for him to travel to Greenland to do some testing and gather some data. and members of the public can help with this. I think the key thing we have to keep in mind is that this mentions this crucial information. So where the sentence is now makes us think, what crucial information? We haven't talked about any crucial information. It's almost like this belongs after sentence 5, where they talk about him going to the Arctic, collecting all the data. It definitely doesn't belong where it is now. In cases 1 and 2, if we put it here or here, it would have the same issue. So it would be talking about him organizing an expedition to gather this crucial information, when it hasn't talked about the information that he needs to gather yet. Because these two sentences are just kind of summarizing what's wrong and why his research is important. So this one definitely belongs after sentence 5. So since writing sections are like 4 passages in one, I decided to divide it up into 2 sections just to avoid you having to watch an hour-long video. The next part will be coming very soon, and until then, thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, and bye!